Hey y'all, I wanted to give you a quick set of pointers for our ethics debate, which is coming up in a few weeks. All right, so what is your actual goal here? A lot of you had questions about what are we actually arguing for and against. The primary goal and ultimately what will comprise your final platform is the topic that you are assigned to. So whether it's climate change, vaccinations, or mental health, is that a public health concern? Meaning, is this a health concern for all or most people in our country, in our region, in our population? Or is this really in the purview of individual health, autonomy, personal choice? Meaning, do my health choices within this topic area affect other people? Or affect enough people that it could actually cause harm to other people? Or are my health choices within this realm really only going to affect me? So that's at least one premise or one element of your platform. The other elements of your platform are going to be your persuasive arguments, your main points that you're making. And we'll get a little bit into the structure of that as we go. But ultimately, what you're wanting to address as your primary statement, this will kind of comprise almost like your thesis statement of the debate, is the topic you're working on a public health issue? Is this a thing that is about public health and good, or is this really about individual health and autonomy and choice? So what are your roles? We talked about this in class as well, but I want to list them here. So we have a couple of team openers, one or two, depending on your group size. We also have one or two people set up to do rebuttals. We have folks who are assigned to doing crossfire, meaning that's when the other team asks your team a question. You also have someone who's set up to respond to the moderator question, which is going to be questions that I ask you. And then you're going to have someone who closes the argument. So it was kind of your finisher. Think about this. Well, I'll get to the kind of the 5-paragraph essay structure, but there's a way to find a parallel there. But definitely think about this as your team opener is setting the stage. Hey, this thing is a public health issue, and here's why. Your rebuttals are going to be formed as your persuasive points, your other 2 or 3 main points that you're going to flush out in more detail. So this might be where you provide some data. This might be where you provide more evidence for what your platform is and what your main points are. Your rebuttals also do have to have some element of addressing what the other team has said in their opening statements, which means that as you're preparing your rebuttals, you also have to prepare, what do I think this other team is going to argue for? So you got to anticipate that. So that's part of the preparation for this, because you can come up with your stance. Hopefully, maybe that even happened today in class. You can even come up with some of your main points and then do a little bit of research and come up with some data. The preparation really for the debate is less so about developing your points and more so about the anticipation, and then eventually scripting it out and having your timing down so that you're ready to go on the last day. So remember that your rebuttals have to be to deepen the audience's understanding of your platform and your points, but also have some element of having addressed and anticipated what the other side was going to say. So it might happen that over the course of the debate that your team is conferring before you respond, but those conferences need to happen fairly quickly because we are on a time schedule. So that's where the preparation in advance comes in. Your crossfire moderator questions, you're going to get to know what those are in advance to some extent. I am going to submit to you this week some moderator questions that I'm going to potentially ask all groups, all 6 groups. So what could happen is that your teams prepare to answer and have an answer for all 3 questions. What could happen is that I'm only going to ask you one of them because that's how much time we have. I'm going to ask each side one question. But you each get to ask each other questions. Theoretically, you could use some of the leftover questions that I don't ask you. So those are for you to decide or for you to model your own questions off of. Thus, also that if each team is preparing for the questions I've posed to you, you're somewhat prepared for what the other team is going to ask you. You could be blindsided, and this is where some conference can happen the day of. Your team closer is going to take it home for you. This is the person who is going to say, you know what? Each team has made some really great points, but this is the thing I really, really need you to know. And we'll talk a little bit more what the end game is with that. So how does this actually work? Some of the things that I told you here. Crossfire moderator questions. Not only are they things that could throw a little wrench in the debate day, right? Put us a little bit in anticipation, a little bit on our toes, but also they are intended to poke holes in the argument. They're intended to find places where there are gaps in the argument. Not to put anybody on the spot in an uncomfortable way, and I'll help you along if that happens, but for all of us to see that in every argument there are holes. And that's what these questions are for. They are intended to create challenges to our stances and for us to see where some of the problems are. This is true all the way through public health, and we've seen this plenty in the course of the pandemic. You'll use your primary platform as the basis for your side of the debate, and you'll have 2 or 3 main points or your arguments. I would suggest to you that you not have more than 2 or 3 main points. Consider that you really only have your opening statement and your rebuttal to make your case, really, and then the rest is in response, and then in your closing statement. So you don't actually have a lot of time. You have 15 minutes. So if you have 4 or 5 points that you really want to argue, I would suggest you pare those down because you won't necessarily get the same amount of time to provide evidence and emphasis to your points. And this last pie piece is kind of where I want to get into the structure. The closest allegory that I can find to what you're doing here is the 5-paragraph essay. Your opening and closing are like your introduction and your conclusion. They're your bookends. Your rebuttal is like the section where you're going to flush out your 2 or 3 main points that would be your persuasive paragraphs in your essay. The distinction is the crossfire and moderator questions. Those are the wrenches. Those don't really show up in your essay, but they're the things that poke the holes, right? That if you were writing a really, really persuasive, very, very well thought out 5-paragraph essay, you would anticipate what some of the challenges were and address those in your essay. What's the end game? So in the closing statement, tie everything together. This is where you pull it all together. So make sure that these things are scripted out. Make sure you have your timing down. Make sure you practice it, right? So that you can feel good about delivering it. Within this last section, you also want to have a call to action. So if you're arguing for public health, tell people like, hey, this is a public health concern and this is what you can do about it. And if you're arguing kind of against public health, that this issue really is about individual choice, autonomy, public health institutions, government systems have no place in this conversation, you want to tell people what to do. Here's what you can do to an individual, on an individual level to not do harm, to keep making your choices, but don't do harm to other people. Because that is one of the arguments you have to make for individual choice is like, okay, we can all make our own choices. But can you tell me it doesn't affect other people? Can you make the case that this doesn't harm other people when you do that? So that's where we're at for the debates. Like I said in class a couple of times, I'm really looking forward to it. This has always been a lot of fun. There's been some questions about like, can we use props? Yes. Can you come dressed up, like ready to go to court? Absolutely. Do you have to? No, but my request is that you come maybe not in your JMEs, and you come, ready to present as if you would for any class presentation where you were trying to make a positive impression. And plan on logistically, what I decided today is what I'll do is I'll come set up the room so that each team or each debate topic is going to be sitting in sort of we'll be sitting in a triangle, and I'll kind of put each of you in a corner, so that you're all set up, ready to go in your groups at your tables. You can have your laptops out, your devices, but that while other people are presenting and debating, you're listening. So there is going to be a team that goes first. There's going to be a team who goes last. So the teams that don't go first, I would prefer that you're actually just sitting there attentively and watching. You can learn a lot from the teams that get to go first, right? By paying attention and seeing how it goes. And for the team that goes first, thank you. You're teaching everybody as well and also taking the hit for going first. But there's challenges on both sides, right? Obviously, the people who go last are sitting there in anticipation, waiting to go. We are all going to be compassionate listeners, and we are going to be listeners. So we're taking in the work that everybody has done. Although you will be sitting at a desk with all your devices, the goal is not for you to be sitting there furiously working on your debate while someone else is doing theirs. The goal is to also have some time to debrief afterwards. So once everybody goes through, each team gets about 30 minutes. We'll just sit and debrief for a little bit, have some treats and hang out and talk a little bit about what that was like and just sort of any take homes from the process and from the class in general, just to wrap up the quarter. Again, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a lot of fun. You'll get to kind of prepare in a even more low stakes way when we do our in-class systems activity the week before. In the meantime, make sure that you guys are getting organized in whatever way that you decide, Google Doc or text or email. Make sure you're starting to script out and work on your timing for what you're going to do so that you feel ready to go that day. And if you have any questions or need anything between now when we see each other again in a couple weeks, please do reach out so that I can make sure that you feel as well prepared as possible for this project. All right, take care.